Hello everybody, I'm the Piano Doctor, and today I want to show you how you can tune your own piano for fairly cheap, even if you have zero experience whatsoever. Some of you have probably seen one of my videos floating around the internet, but if you haven't, my name is Josiah Jackson. I go by the Piano Doctor on social media. I'm a professional piano tuner in the USA, and I've been making content around piano tuning, repairs, cleaning for a few years now. Since then, literally thousands of you have commented and asked how you can tune your own piano. So in this video, I want to give you a full breakdown of a process that anyone can use to get a pretty decent tuning. So here's everything that I'm gonna walk you through. First, we're gonna start off with some warnings. From there, we're gonna talk about how to take apart an upright piano, as well as the tools that you're going to need to tune it, including the best tuning app for beginners. After that, I'll talk about the most important thing to address before you tune a piano. A lot of people forget about this, but if you don't address it, your piano can literally go out of tune in 3 or 4 days. And of course, I'll walk you through a step-by-step way to tune each and every note on the piano, as well as how to avoid breaking strings while you're at it. I'll also have a bonus section for tuning grand pianos. Okay, that's a lot of information to cover, so there will be timestamps throughout the video, but as I'll talk in a second, I don't recommend using timestamps to skip around throughout the video. Instead, here's how I recommend to watch it. First, sit down and watch the video all the way through to get a big aerial view of what we're going to do. And then when you have your tools in hand and you're ready to start tuning, start the video over again and walk through with me step by step until we have a completely tuned piano. And at that point, you can feel free to pause or rewind as much as you need to. Now, I want this video to be the best video on how to tune your own piano for years to come. In fact, I've had a ton of people mention that I should sell this video as an online course for like $200. So without further ado, let's dive into some warnings about tuning your own piano. The first warning is do not skip around throughout this video. Every single part is very important, and the whole video is condensed to give you the core necessities of what you need. And if you don't follow along exactly, that means that you can end up risking breaking strings or just getting a tuning that doesn't sound very good. The second warning is that in general, I recommend hiring a professional piano tuner. There's a reason we have a job doing this. It's a difficult thing to do. The third and final warning that I'll give you is don't start charging for piano tunings like this one that I'm about to show you. It's just gonna be an amateur level piano tuning, and it won't be worthy of charging professional prices for. To be a professional piano tuner and charge $150, $200 a tuning, you need to at least be able to check your work by ear, if not tune the whole piano completely by ear. Okay, with all of that out of the way, we can now start taking apart the piano and actually tuning it. For this part of the video, I decided to hop into a voiceover, and I tried to pick a piano that is very similar to most of the other pianos out there. However, there will be some differences. So right here, I'm loosening up some little latches on the inside. Most of the time, those just need to twist up, and then you can slide the front panel out. Now, this part probably has the most variation. A lot of older pianos aren't taken apart like this, but a lot of the newer ones are. So we're gonna close the keyboard, lift up on the back, and then we're gonna see these little white tabs that we need to flip up. And then on the other side, they can be a little bit difficult to grab. So I use actually the back of a tuning mute, and I'll hook it in there, pull up the white tab, and then finish it the rest of the way with my finger. And once those are clear, this next part is a little bit tricky. Try not to scratch up the finish on your piano, but all you have to do is just twist up and lift. The next task is to remove this felt rail because it can get in the way of the tuning pins. So first we're gonna gently push down on the felt rail, and then we can grab the little pole that's kind of hooking it on the bottom and lift that up and out. Now we can release the tension on the felt rail. Step 2 is to take off the spring. This part can be a little bit tricky, and if you're having too much trouble, try and move to step 3 actually before this. Right here, step 3 is we push in on the metal and kind of slide the whole rail up and out. Just go ahead and set it here, and we can work on the other side. Just the same thing where we push it in and then the whole rail should come out. As with all the parts, make sure you set it in a safe spot to the side. We have the piano taken apart, so now let's talk about the tools that we're going to need to actually tune the piano. The first tool you're going to need is a tuning lever or a tuning hammer, whatever you would like to call it. And when I first started, I bought a really cheap kit off of Amazon. It was like $40, but within one tuning, the end of the hammer I had completely stripped out and it was useless. So I really don't recommend buying a cheap thing from Amazon or eBay. Most of the time they're very poor quality and they don't work very well. If you want a good quality tuning hammer that won't break, will get you a decent tuning. At the same time, it won't break the bank either and won't cost $300, $500 like other professional tuning levers sometimes do, then this tuning lever right here is a great option for you guys. It's the same one I'll be using throughout the entire video to tune this piano. So if you want one of these tuning levers, there's no pressure to buy from me at all. But if you want one, there's a link in the description where you can purchase that. If you want to support the channel so I can keep making free videos for you guys, then purchasing one of these is an easy way to do that. Next, we're going to need some rubber mutes. These will be muting off the strings that we don't want to sound as we're tuning. These are the ones that I use every single day on the job. So if you want 3 or 4 of these for free, then use the link in the description to buy the tuning lever and I'll throw in those for free. The last thing you're going to need is a tuning device. And here's where it gets tricky because every piano you've ever heard is technically out of tune. See, you can't just use any tuner like a guitar tuner or some free tuning app out there and expect it to work very well. And why regular tuners don't work has to do with really complicated things like inharmonicity and equal temperament. Quick aside here, if you're interested in learning more, I highly recommend an old YouTube video called Why It's Impossible to Tune a Piano. He does a really good job of making it educational and yet really entertaining as well. I just don't want to spend as much time as he spends going into that right now. We just don't really need to know it. All you need to know is that you need a special tuner in order to tune a piano. So I reached out to the owner of the software that I use every single day called PianoScope. The owner of this app is actually a software engineer from Germany, and he invented this app during the COVID lockdowns so he could tune his own piano because he couldn't get any piano tuners out there to actually tune his piano. And it is the best tuning software I've ever used. And if you download that app with the link in the description, you get a 14-day free trial, which should be plenty of time to tune your own piano at home. And if you'd like to purchase the beginner version from there, then you can do that, but there's no pressure to. Quick pro tip, I would definitely recommend waiting until you have your tools in hand before you download that app, because I would feel terrible if you downloaded it and then ran out of your trial. Okay, one last thing before we can actually jump in and start tuning this piano, and I have to address this because it is super, super important. You have to make sure your humidity and your temperature are stable in the room. Otherwise, you're going to tune the piano and then the humidity is going to change the tuning right after you're done. It can fluctuate a tiny bit, but the more stable, the better. Make sure that your piano isn't over an air vent or air intake, or there aren't any windows open or anything like that before you get started. All right, we're at the piano now, and the first thing we're going to want to do is take some measurements of this piano's inharmonicity using the PianoScope app. So go ahead and open the PianoScope app. This should be the first screen that you see whenever you open the app. I'm going to go ahead and turn my phone sideways, and these are all the piano's files that I have saved. We just need to go and hit Create New Piano. Now for the name, you don't really need to have anything super specific because you don't need to file a bunch of different types of pianos or anything like that. So you can just go ahead and put My Piano. That's what I'm going to put here. Everything else by default should be good to go, but just in case, go ahead and check that your tuning style is balanced, temperament is equal, range A0 to C8, and concert pitch 440 Hertz. If that is all set, go ahead and hit Create. So we have a new piano set up, so go ahead and hit Measure Inharmonicity. Okay, this process can be a little bit tedious, but the whole tuning is going to be a little bit tedious. We're going to go through and play each one of the notes from A0 all the way up to C7, which is the octave below the highest note. And on that one, you can see a little green bar is starting to rise. Once that green bar is fully loaded and you see a dot appear on the screen, you should be good to go. Go ahead and head to the next note. Okay, so we're finished playing all of the notes, and you may notice that some of the dots don't line up exactly with the line, especially around the bridge break right here. That's completely normal, nothing to worry about. Go ahead and hit Done on the top right of the screen now. Now the piano tuning is set up for this unique piano, so let's go ahead and try tuning just one string. Before we get started tuning any of these strings, just some general remarks. You'll notice that each of the notes have 3 strings leading up to 3 tuning pins. So in order to tune a string properly, we have to mute off the outside strings so we can tune one string at a time. So let me show you what that looks like. First, go ahead and play middle C. And then follow the hammer along to the correct strings. You should see a group of 3. Go ahead and insert one mute to the right of those 3 strings and one mute to the left of those 3 strings. So it should look just like so. So now we only have one string that is sounding. That's the middle string. So go ahead and take your tuning lever and place it right on the middle tuning pin. Now this is very important that we get it on the right pin and start turning the right pin, because if you start turning the wrong one, you'll turn it too much and boom, snap, you broke a string because you didn't hear it turning or anything like that. And I would recommend, as a beginner, double check this, triple check this, and I will also teach you some tips as you're going through here to make sure that you are on the right tuning pin. So go ahead and follow the middle string up with your tuning hammer, and that leads to this tuning pin right here. Now, whenever you place the tuning hammer on the tuning pin, try and get it as close to straight vertical as you can. This will just allow you to get a better feel on the tuning pin and get a more stable tuning. Okay, let me show you how to tune a note. So go ahead and play middle C. Now you'll notice on the tuner that the red line is quite a bit below 0 on this one. Our goal is to get that red line very close to 0, if not right on 0. First thing that we're going to do before anything else is make sure that we're on the right tuning pin. So we're going to grab our tuning lever, play the note, and we're going to drop it flat, just to make sure that we can hear and see a difference on the tuning device, to make sure that we're on the right note. If we don't see a change, then we need to double, triple check, quadruple check to make sure that we're on the right tuning pin for that string. Otherwise, we can end up breaking a string. So let's go ahead and play the note and drop it flat. Now, I definitely exaggerated dropping that down quite a bit, but it's to get you guys used to, we need to really pull this thing out of tune. That way we can tell that for sure we're on the right tuning pin, because that is super, super important. Okay, now that that's done, let's go ahead and pull that note up to the 0, slightly past, and then drop it back into 0. That's the best way to get a stable tuning. So let me show you what that looks like. And generally, whenever I'm moving the tuning hammer, you can see I'm using these jerk-like movements, and that helps me actually move the string to where I want to. And you'll see once you start tuning a piano, oftentimes these tuning pins can be very tight and difficult to move. You really don't want to use this like a wrench and twist it. You really want to kind of snap the tuning pin exactly where it should be, and that should give you a more stable tuning. Alright, so we're very close to 0 there, but the goal is you want to bring the pitch up over where it should be and then drop it ever so slightly back down. So we want to bring it just about a cent above where it should be to the 1 mark. Those are called cents, by the way. And so we're going to bring it up to that 1 mark and then ever so slightly just kind of tap it, or almost just drop the tuning hammer ever so slightly back down to 0. And you'll notice I played this C note very hard one time, and that's to make sure that the string is actually set where it should be and won't go out of tune after you play the piano very hard. Alright, so congratulations, we got our very first string in tune. Alright guys, I'm here with a grand piano now. Most all of the process will be exactly the same for actually tuning, but there's a few different things that you need to do while tuning a grand piano compared to an upright, so I just wanted to point those out. First, to take apart a grand piano, let's start by lifting up on this lid right here. And then from there, we can take off the music rest. Typically, these just slide straight out like so. Every once in a while, there will be screws holding them in place like this. Either that or you slide out a little bit and then lift up. Most of the time though, they're just gonna slide right out. For the final piece, it's not always completely necessary to take these off, but if you can, it's a little bit helpful, and you don't want to be doing this the whole time that you're tuning and moving that around. So it's probably best to take it off if you can, if it's easy to get to. A lot of these lift straight up and out, but for this one, it has a spring on the back side of it. So what you need to do is apply pressure to that spring. That way you can lift up one side and then you can lift out the whole thing. So I'm gonna do that real quick. So I push with our left hand in, and then I can lift up with my right hand at the same time. Just very gently that slides out, and then you can lift up on the other side as well and take out the whole piece. And a lot of times with those, they might have screws holding them in place here. Either that or they're attached to the cheek blocks, and those are a little bit more difficult to take out. So for those, especially if you're a beginner, I generally just recommend leaving them in the piano. All right, let's talk about positioning for sitting whenever you're tuning. So whenever you sit to tune a grand piano, you kind of want to turn almost so that your right shoulder is just kind of hanging above the board here. And then you can very easily make adjustments instead of sitting straight forward and then you're reaching way over to try and, tune way out here. Just turn to the side, it's a lot easier. And obviously the most notable thing about tuning a grand piano is that the strings are running across the piano instead of vertical like in a vertical piano. That means the tuning pins are laying out right here in front of you. So what you want to do is the exact same thing as before. You want to start off by following the string back to the tuning pin, and essentially you tune it the exact same way as on an upright piano. You just hold your tuning lever out like so instead of at a 90-degree angle here. You really want it out vertical. All right, that's it for the grand piano. From here, you just follow the exact same process that I'm laying out in the other one. So let's go back to the upright piano, since I assume that's what most of you will probably be tuning. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna take out the mute on the right side of those 3 strings. So now we have 2 strings that are unmuted and will both sound together. You can hear it sounds a little bit funny, that has a little bit of a twang or a honky-tonk sound in it. Our goal is to get rid of that and have the note sound pure, like it's 1 string instead of 2. So what we're gonna do is hold this C slightly down, follow the rightmost string up to the bottom tuning pin. Generally, it's on the bottom of a set of 3. All right, so we're going to go with our finger up just one more time, just test, make sure we're on the right one. And yes, we're on the right one. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna drop it down again, drop it flat to make sure that we're on the right tuning pin. That's all we wanna check right now. Yep, we definitely heard a change in pitch there, so we know we are on the right tuning pin. Now we can actually start to try and tune it. And we're gonna do the same thing that we did for the first string. We're gonna bring it up till we hear it pretty close to pure, slightly over, and then gently, just gently nudge it back down. Okay, don't be sad or ashamed if it takes you a very long time to get something that you're happy with and sounds pretty good. I've been tuning pianos for years and I've gotten fairly quick at it. It will probably take you a lot longer to get something that sounds pure. In order to get a note to sound pure or sound good, you have to understand what beats are. So let's talk about those for a second. Essentially, beats are created when you have 2 different sound waves beating at slightly different speeds, and they sort of crash into each other and make it go loud and then quiet, loud and then quiet. So whenever you hear an out of tune note like this, on top of hearing 2 different sounds, you're also hearing the note get louder and then quieter, and then louder and then quieter. And it starts getting faster and faster the farther out of tune those 2 strings get from each other. And minimize those as much as possible. It should be beatless whenever you're tuning 2 strings together, and then you have a pure note. Hey guys, so I'm editing this video right now, and literally as I'm editing, one of my favorite YouTube channels called Veritasium released a video about how audio illusions work. And in that video, Derek Muller does a really good job of explaining beating and the science behind it. And I want to play you guys a clip from that because I think it'll really help you nail down and train your ear to be able to hear beats a little bit better. So I'm going to play a clip from that and then we'll go back to the video.
When two pipes are slightly out of tune, there's this pulsing effect to the sound. You can hear that in a more pronounced way if I play pure tones. Here is a pure 261 Hz sine wave and a pure 263 Hz sine wave. When both of these tones play, those compression and refraction waves interfere with each other. Sometimes the peaks line up to produce a louder sound, and when a peak lines up with a trough, they cancel out. Because these frequencies are separated by 2 Hz, you hear 2 louder pulses every second. This is known as beating. Now the beats are really clear.
Now I'm going to play this string again and just listen and see if you can hear those beats that we just talked about. So you can definitely tell this one is out of tune if you listen closely. So we're going to drop it low in pitch. Alright, and we are on the right string, so that's good. We're going to pull it up to pitch now, slightly past, and then nudge it back. Alright, that's pretty good right there. So now we're going to play the note really hard just to make sure that it stays in tune. And then we can play it again to see if it went out of tune. Perfect. It is now in tune and staying in tune whenever we play it very hard. It's very, very important that you both play the note very hard and go slightly above pitch and nudge it back, because that helps equalize the tension on that string through all the bearing points on the piano. Alright, so we can go ahead and take out the left mute and move it to the right of those 3 strings. So let's play this note and again listen for some beats to see if we can hear it. They should be pretty fast because this one's out of tune. So what we're going to do, it's the same process that we did for the other 2 strings. We're going to nudge it down. Just make sure that the pitch changed or the red line changed on the tuning device, and we should be good to bring it back up to pitch, slightly above, and gently, gently, gently nudge it back down. So that sounds pretty good right there, but we need to go above and then nudge it back down. Alright, that sounds pretty good right there. Again, we'll play the note really hard. And that still sounds pretty good, so we can go ahead and take our mute out. And congratulations, we have our very first tuned string. And a lot of piano work is doing the same thing 88 times. So we're going to go ahead and move to the next note, C sharp, and repeat the whole process again. So again, we hold C sharp here, and then we can move our tuning lever, track it up to the middle string, which should be the middle tuning pin here. Make sure that that hammer is vertical and not a 90-degree angle like this. We don't want that. Let's go ahead and play C sharp. We can see that it's flat quite a bit on the tuner, so let's go ahead and bump it down. Alright, we are on the right string, so let's bring it up to 0, slightly past, and then nudge it back down. So That's good. We made it slightly past, and now ever so slightly tap it. All right, that's pretty close to 0 right there. So we have the middle string in tune, and again, I played it very hard to make sure that it would stay in tune later whenever we actually start playing the piano. And now we can take out the rightmost mute, move our tuning lever down to the rightmost string. So we'll play this note right here, move it up along, and it should be the bottom of that group of 3. And then we can play and see how that sounds. You can definitely hear a beat in there if you're listening closely. Again, don't be worried if you can't hear them right away. Just try and get it as close as possible, and over time your ear will start to develop and start to hear those beats more clearly. So that was pretty quick. I already just bumped it and it moved right to 0, but that's not what we want, because then it will go out of tune very quickly once we start playing the piano or we start tuning other strings. So we need to go slightly past and nudge it down, and again, that will help equalize the tension across those bearing points. So listen there and see if you can hear that beat. I'm kind of tracking it with my hand. You can almost hear like a meow, meow, meow. Again, it sounds a little bit funny, but doing that really helps me to pay attention and hear those beats a little bit more. So it's slightly sharp. It's really hard to tell whenever you're first starting out, especially if the string that you're tuning is slightly sharp of the middle string or slightly below the middle string. So when in doubt, always just drop it lower, and then you can just essentially restart the tuning and start bringing it back up slightly above and then drop it down. And again, if you're in doubt, start over, bring it low, start again. And whenever you're first starting out, you'll probably have to do that a few times for each string. Anyway, back to this note, we need to drop it slightly lower. That's pretty good right there, so we're going to play the note hard and make sure it stays in tune. Pretty good. All right, so we can take out the leftmost mute and move it to the right of those group of 3, and then that way we only have 2 strings sounding, the 2 on the left. So we can move the tuning hammer up, track it to the topmost of that 3. Again, just double check, make sure we're on the right one. Let's say we put the tuning lever on the one right next to it accidentally, and we start trying to tune that string. Well, if we're not hearing anything being moved around in pitch at all, we need to halt what we're doing, everything what we're doing, and double check, make sure we're on the right one. So follow it up, follow that string behind the little bar right there, and oh, we're on the wrong one, and so we need to move over and put the tuning lever on the right tuning bed. Okay, so let's nudge it down, make sure we're on the right one. Good, we did hear a change in pitch, so that's a good sign. That means we're on the right tuning pin. Now let's bring it up, slightly above, and then nudge it back down. All right, see if you guys can hear where that is. I'm not sure if it's a little bit sharp or a little bit flat, so I'm going to continue going until I hear something that sounds kind of pure or good or in tune, and then go slightly above that. So right now the left string is slightly sharp compared to the middle string, so we can hear a little bit of that beat. See if you can hear it. It sounds a little bit like a cat's meow again. I know it sounds a little bit weird when I do this with my voice, but it sounds like meow, meow. And again, we're getting that louder and softer. Let's go ahead and tune this one. Okay, the unison is now in tune. That's what it's called whenever you're tuning 2 strings to each other. We can now move to the next string. So I'm going to go ahead and take this mute out and move it over to the next note right here to the right side. And then we need another one on the left so we can just tune the middle string. And from here on out, it's basically just repeating that same process over and over again. So I'm going to go ahead and put the process that I'm doing over here on the left side so you can just listen and you don't have to hear me talking the whole time, and try and pick apart that process. Listen for each step in the tuning. Alright, I've got a bonus for you guys because I wanted to show you an example of what it would be like to tune a note if it happens to be sharp. Most pianos go flat over time, but sometimes the notes will go sharp, so you need to learn how to tune those as well. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to put the tuning lever on the middle one, and we're going to, again, just the same as we would, drop it low to make sure we're on the right tuning pin, but this time we're going to keep going. Instead of just dropping it a little bit, we're going to drop it all the way below zero, probably at least a couple cents below. Then we can continue just the same as normal, where we bring it up slightly past and nudge it back down, test blow it, and set it in. Okay. Same for the other strings on the right and the left. Drop it low and then continue as normal. Okay, E4 is now in tune, so I'm going to go ahead and continue working my way up until I reach about here, and then I can give you some tips for tuning these strings on the edge, because those can be a little tricky to tune. One thing that I did want to mention real quick is that if your piano is sharp on a lot of the notes, it's very possible that the piano will need 2 or even 3 tunings so that it will hold stable. For some reason, whenever a piano goes sharp and you try and tune it like lower and then bring it back up to pitch, it just has a really hard time holding a tune. So it will likely over the next couple months need a few tunings. On top of that, if your piano hasn't been tuned in a while and it's way more out of tune than what you're seeing here, where the tuning device is on a 5 and instead it's at a -30, -50, sometimes even -150, I've seen it on some pianos, it's very likely going to need 2 or even 3 tunings. So I leave that up to your judgment, how many you would like to do, but just realize that it's very likely going to go out of tune fairly quickly. So you're going to need to tune it a couple times if it's fairly out of tune. Okay, so as we get to around this area, we're going to see that there's obviously a break in the strings right here, and that can make these 3 strings a little bit difficult to tune. And a lot of times pianos don't really allow you to stick mutes in between like that, so you can mute off the middle string and go from there. And this piano you can, but for demonstration purposes, I'm going to tune it like you can't fit a mute in there. So if you look closely, I'm going to go ahead and zoom in the camera. You'll see the 3 strings right here, and I'm going to go ahead and stick it between the left 2 strings, just like so. So now we're just going to tune the rightmost string to the tuning device. Alright, so the right string is in tune, so we're going to take the mute out and then move it over to the left so that we have the 3 strings right here, and then the mute just muting off the leftmost string, and that will allow us to tune the middle to the right string. Alright, I think that's the closest we're going to get right there. So I'm going to go ahead and pull out the mute, and now we're going to tune the leftmost string. So follow the leftmost string up to the top tuning pin, and we're going to tune that string to 2 other strings instead of just 1. It's a little bit more difficult, especially if you're not really accustomed to hearing beats very well, but it does get the job done. So that's all we're trying to do today. Alright, and that's pretty good right there, and might not be the most perfect tuning I've ever done, but that's all we're trying to do is just get the piano sounding decent. We're not gonna get a professional job. It's gonna take a long time to master how to tune beats completely pure, so this is just to get the piano sounding good enough so that you can play it and it won't bug you anymore. Okay, for the next string, we're going to do the same thing, but on the opposite side. So we're going to stick it between the rightmost 2 strings, and then we're going to follow the left string all the way up to the top, and go ahead and tune that string to the tuning device. All right, from there, again, take out the mute and move it just to the right of those 3 strings. So it's muting off just 1 string, and it might be a little bit tricky sometimes to get it in there. So you could, on this piano especially it is, so you can flip around the tuning mute like that. It's a little bit difficult sometimes, and every once in a while the hammer might hit, but just do the best you can to mute off that string. All right, so we're going to take the tuning hammer now, and we're going to move it to the middle tuning pin because it's the middle string. Pull it up, make sure we're on the right string, which we heard a change in pitch, so we are. So we're going to go ahead and pull it up, and we're just, again, tuning the middle string to the leftmost string now because the left one is tuned to the tuning device. All right, that's pretty pure right there. So again, take out the mute. We're gonna tune the rightmost string to the left two strings. That string is in tune, so let's go ahead and move to the next strings. For these notes in particular, it can be a little bit difficult to mute both of the outside strings. So what I like to do is press the damper pedal, the rightmost pedal, and that should lift the dampers up. So then you can stick your mute down below those dampers and then release it. That just gives the hammer a little bit more space to work, because if you try and stick the mute right here, that hammer is going to be hitting the mute a little bit, and it doesn't get you a very clean sound, as well as you don't want that happening. So press the damper pedal down, stick the mute underneath there, and then release the damper pedal, and that should give you a good clean tone for the hammer to sound. And now that you understand what I'm doing, I'm just going to walk you through a couple examples of how I would tune these strings, and then I'll time lapse up to this area. So we can press the damper pedal again to take out that mute on the right side. And we can hear it's definitely out of tune, so let's go ahead and tune this one. Okay, so we can hear that's another good example of where we brought it down below and kind of locked it in, and it sounded good, but as soon as we test blowed it, we hit it pretty hard, then it knocked it out of tune, so we need to, again, pull that up and then test blow it again, make sure it stays there. Okay, so just continue that pattern up to here throughout the damper section, and I'll show you a trick for the top couple octaves. As you're tuning, the higher and higher up the piano you go, the more difficult it can be to hear beats. So especially as a beginner, I recommend just muting off one of the strings at a time and tuning each string individually to the tuning device. I'll show you what that's like in a second. Just so you know, I wouldn't recommend that as a professional tuning, but since this is just a beginner, amateur, just get the piano sounding decent tuning, then that should be plenty sufficient and get the piano fairly close. Here's what it would be like to individually tune each string. So you'd start with, let's say it's C here. We're gonna stick a mute in between like that, so only the leftmost string is sounding. Follow it up, make sure it's on the right tuning pin. and then we can tune it to the tuning device. Now that the left string is in tune all the way, I'm going to take the mute out and put it in between the left and the middle string so that only the right string is sounding. And you can see on these top strings, it's very easy to go too far. Just be really careful whenever you're doing this. I keep making that mistake of pulling it too tight. This is where you're most likely to break a string. All right, that's pretty good right there. So now what I'm gonna do is move that mute over to the left side of the 3 strings. I'm gonna go ahead and move the tuning hammer just so you can make sure to see all right. And then we have 1 mute to the right side. Now we can put the tuning hammer on the middle tuning pin. Again, follow it up, make sure we're on the right one. And then tune that to the tuning device as well. There we go. Now that they're all tuned to the tuning device, we can take all the tools off here and just see how it sounds. Yeah, as a professional piano tuner, that doesn't really please my ear a whole lot. I can definitely hear that it could be a little bit better, but overall, the top keys aren't played a whole lot, and as long as they're pretty close, it's good enough for an amateur tuning. I'll go ahead and use a couple more examples of tuning a string just like that, where you mute off each one of them, and then I'll go ahead and continue with the time lapse. Okay, now that we've finished up tuning all the way to the very top note, we're going to go back down to C4 and then start working our way down the rest of the piano. So again, we're here tuning one of these strings where there's no string to the left of it to really stick your mute in, and you can put it in the side kind of like this, but not every piano allows you to do that. So what I like to do is either tune all strings to the tuning device if you're a beginner, or I do kind of like what we did up here, but now down here where we put a mute in the right 2 strings this time and then tune the left one. And now that the left string is in tune, we can take that mute out and put it to the right of the group of 3 strings, and then move our tuning hammer down to the middle one and tune those 2 together. And then once those 2 are tuned, we can now take the mute out completely and tune the bottom string to the 2 other strings. starting to tune bass strings. So you'll notice for bass strings, there are only 2 strings for each note instead of 3, which is good news because that actually makes our job a little bit easier. So we're just going to mute off one of the strings here, and I'll go ahead and tune the right string to the tuning device. Oh, mutes fall out sometimes. That does happen. Let's go ahead and put it back in. All right, that one's looking pretty good, so I'll go ahead and take the mute out. And you can hear the beat there. It's a little bit slow, and it might be a little bit harder to hear in the bass section, but you can definitely hear, if you listen really closely, there is a louder and softer and louder and softer. Again, that's what we're listening for, not necessarily just, oh, does it sound good? Because something might sound good, but not necessarily be in tune. So let's listen to it again. Alright, so we brought it up 2, we're going to bring it a little bit past and then back down, just the same as all the other strings over here, except now we're only working with 2, so once we do this, it'll be done. Alright, that one's good to go. Let's go ahead, I'll do a couple more example strings, and again, I'll just have the process here up on the left so that you don't have to listen to me talking the whole time, but I'm going to go ahead and start moving my way down the keyboard. It's really difficult to start hearing the beats once it comes to these really low bass notes with 2 strings. Once we get to here, you can see there's only 1 string for each note instead of 2, and at that point it becomes easy. You just match it up with the tuning device, but we'll get there when we get there. For now, let's just go ahead and do these strings right here. And this is a situation, again, kind of like earlier when we're working with the very top octaves, where it's okay as a beginner to go ahead and single out each of the strings there and tune them all directly to the tuning device. However, you'll probably get a better tuning if you can hear those beats to just go ahead and try and tune the unisons by ear. All right, we've now moved to this section with only one bass string per hammer. And again, we're gonna check and make sure, follow it up and make sure we're on the right tuning pin. The laying out of these tuning pins can be really confusing sometimes in the really low bass section. So double, triple, quadruple, even quintuple check, especially in the low bass section, to make sure you're on the right tuning pin. Otherwise you can break a string. All right, that one's pretty close to in tune, but I'm gonna go ahead and pull it out of tune and show you what it would be like to tune a single bass string. There we go. I'll go ahead and move to the next couple. All right, there we go. We finished up the whole piano. Hopefully, if anything, by the end of this video, you realize why professional piano tuners have a job and why they can charge so much, because this is a difficult thing to do and most people would just much rather hire it out. Couple things that I must mention before you click off the video, and that is one, if your piano hasn't been tuned in a while, if it was fairly out of tune, it's going to need a few tunings over the next few months to actually get it to hold stable. So if you notice your piano is going out of tune fairly quickly, don't panic. That's very normal. It may in fact have already gone out of tune a little bit. A lot of professional piano tuners will go ahead and do 2 passes since they're already there. You have the advantage of spacing it out over a week or so, and that should help the piano tuning hold even better because it gives the piano time to sort of settle in with the new adjustments to the strings. And again, like I said at the beginning of the video, this is just an amateur level tuning. If you're interested in becoming a professional piano tuner and learning how to tune by ear, how to do regulations and voicing, then click right here where I tell you the best way that you can get started learning how to tune and repair pianos. I also go into how you can get your first clients, how much piano tuners get paid. It's super, super in-depth. So click that video if you want to learn more about how to become a professional. Don't forget, if you want the exact tools that I'm using in this video, use the links in the description and you can find those there. Anyway, thank you guys. I'm signing off for now. If you want to watch the other video, click here.